All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Sarah Brothers. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications for the Downtown San Diego Partnership. For those of you who don't know us, the Downtown Partnership is a nonprofit organization focused on advancing the economic prosperity and cultural vitality of downtown through membership, advocacy, public services, and great events like the one that we're here for today. On behalf of the Downtown Partnership and our sponsor, Intesa Communications Group, who we will hear from in just a bit. We want to welcome you to the final session of Fed and Educated series for the year. It's hard to believe that 2021 is right around the corner. Fed and Educated is designed to help businesses thrive by engaging industry experts to share their knowledge and offer turnkey solutions to some of today's most prevalent business challenges. As you know, today's conversation is going to focus on how you can continue to drive your career and professional development, even amidst all the challenges of this year. We hope you leave this conversation with our panel of experts with a little more confidence in how you can continue to learn and grow. As a matter of a couple housekeeping notes for today's session, please keep an eye out on the chat box as our experts are going to be sharing a lot of resources to go along with today's discussion, things you can read, places you can go to learn more. We also encourage you to submit any questions you might have using the Q&A feature today so that can be incorporated into our discussion later on. As I mentioned, today's session is sponsored by Intesa Communications Group, a strategic communications and government relations firm based here in San Diego and a valued member of the Downtown Partnership. And with that, I will pass things along to the capable hands of Margie Newman, founding partner of Intesa, for a brief message and to moderate the session. Margie, so nice to see you again this week.
Hey, Sarah. Sarah and I have seen a lot of each other this week, and it's delightful. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for being here with us today. We know there's a lot of offerings out there on Zoom, and the fact that you're here means a lot. We want to also thank the Downtown Partnership team for their just commitment to the Fed and Educated series throughout the pandemic. When we first thought of this, it was going to be a lunch and learn. That's why it's called Fed and Educated. We were actually going to feed you, but then, Rona's going to Rona. And so now you have to feed yourselves, but we're still going to educate you. And my company, Intesa Communications Group, we jumped at the chance to sponsor this session because we're a reputation management firm. We help clients communicate with confidence on good days and bad days and all the opportunities in between. So when it comes to your personal, professional reputation, I really believe you're your own client. This is on you to find ways to constantly communicate your value to your team and your organization. Before I was a business owner, I was a PR gal. And I spent a lot of time finding ways to proactively communicate my value. There were memos, there were emails. I didn't wait till my annual review. And I really believed it was my burden and responsibility to drive my own career. And some of you may be wondering, is it okay right now? Is it unacceptable to advocate for my career or change industries or just push for that training I want in a pandemic? And we're here to tell you it is acceptable. It's permission granted, as Sarah named this session, to do that. And if there's anything I can do to ever help you figure that out, I really do mean it. Taylor's going to drop my communications, all my way to find me in the chat. And I really do encourage you to hit me up because I love this stuff and would love to talk to you about it. But today we have brought together a few experts to help you be excited about owning these responsibilities and these opportunities. Today, we're going to hear from James Tarbox, who directs San Diego State University's Career Development Services Division. So he's got a lot of knowledge and with students, with alumni, with businesses. He's going to share that with us today. And Angela Hanning, who manages the HR division of Hyatt Hotels Corporation, from right here, actually from literally right there in my screen. That building, that hotel right there, the Grand Hyatt. Angela is going to share her expertise with you. And it's not just tools they're going to give you. They really are going to give you encouragement because this can be exciting, not daunting if you choose to view it that way. So with that, I really want to jump into some opening questions for our panelists with James and with Angela. We will start with James. So James, what is something folks may not know about you if they just looked at your resume? What is it about your career that they might need to know?
Sure. I think that what people would not know is that the career that I studied for, which was to become a professor, is not the career that I pursued, which was to become a manager. But one quick note, all the skills that I gained in terms of my studies, I use every day, and three that stand out for me are research, communication, and motivating people.
That's awesome. Uh, what are you most hopeful about in 2021, James? There's a lot of what I love about you and Angela, and during this prep time together, is you guys have a really positive energy. So, what are you hopeful about in 2021?
Yeah, I'm really hopeful about the churn and the change that's occurred in a number of industries in 2020 that are going to create many, many opportunities in 2021. I think our challenge is going to be to really look for those and see them and seize them.
Awesome. Angela, so we again the positivity that you guys exude is really wonderful. And so I want to ask you about kind of what are the professional gifts that came out of 2021? Not all the negative things, we all know those, but what are those kind of blessings that came up for you this year?
Sure. Well, first, I want to just thank you for having me. Thanks to the Downtown Partnership. So I think some of the gifts, as James was mentioning, we've seen a lot of industries maybe come up and bloom. But one thing I know from hospitality, while we're in business recovery, I am so encouraged about the experimentation. And when you think about innovation and having to be the disruptor in industries so that you don't become irrelevant. I'm really proud of what the team at the Hyatt has been doing about just making sure we're keeping our colleagues safe. We're making sure that we meet all of our customers' needs. And that experimentation of being able to innovate and understand how are we going to run a successful organization in the midst of a pandemic while servicing our guests has been paramount for us. And I'm really proud of the work that we've been doing. So experimentation, innovation, I think is what really is driving the force behind the silver lining is making sure that we remain in experimentation mode.
Great. And then, I think a lot of this is, when you're working for employers, you don't know what it's like to be an employer a lot of times. And so you wonder, what's the mindset of employers? So as we close out 2020 and all its craziness and go into the next year, what are employers thinking right now when it comes to hiring or talent retention?
So being in the space of talent management, I will tell you, we're laser focused on what our workforce is going to look like post-pandemic. We've exposed work from home opportunities. And so we really are focusing on how are we going to keep our talent engaged during this time? And how are we preparing our workforce for the future?
Great. So Angela, we'll get back to you in a little bit. We're gonna let James kick us off because he's got kind of the lay of the land he's gonna give us, and I think that's some good context for us. So we're gonna kick it over to James for about 15 minutes and let him talk to you guys about what he sees and what you can do about it. So James, to you.
Thank you. Here we go. Welcome, everybody. And by the way, thank you so much for being here. As I get started and pause on this opening slide for a second, I wanted to say thank you to Margie Newman, Sarah Brothers, Angela Hanning, Taylor Stahl, and Caitlin Phillips. They really were the dream team in terms of putting this together. It's been a real privilege to work with them. I wanted to mention two things. The first is, as you listen to both my presentation and Angela's presentation, please do not wait until 2021 to get started. I emphasize that because what you know will happen is in January of 2021, there'll be a chorus of invitations to network. If you get yourself out in front of people starting now and start to take manageable steps in your career, I can guarantee you that you'll have a lot more to act on when 2021 comes into our screen, as it were. I did want to mention also that one of the things you might want to think about as you approach 2021 is, do you have a personal board of advisors, someone who helps guide your career? The final thing I want to mention is there's an asterisk at the bottom of the slide, and what it does is it defines unabashed. I really want to emphasize that when we go into career development, one of the things that's really easy to do is to go to shame. For example, when we don't get the job we want, or when we get rejected in whatever way, it's real easy to go to shame. And the problem with shame is it silences us. So what I want to encourage you to do as you think about your career and you take those risks, do not let yourself be silenced. We really need you and we need your light in the world. and especially in your careers. Could we go to the next slide? I'd like you all to take part in a 3-question poll. And while you're doing that, I'm just going to actually tell you a little bit about why I asked these 3 questions. So while you're taking these polls, please feel free to listen in to me. The first one, this is an invitation to participate. Do you plan to participate in your career in 2021? Please know there's no right answer here, but this is really, I'm trying to see and we're trying to see, are you going to get involved? The second one, if you want to participate, where will you need support? Please know that everybody needs support somewhere in their career, all of us. And so this is really important for you to kind of start to figure out what's your foundation and where do you need to build. And then third, I mentioned this earlier, if you have, or if you plan to set up a personal board of advisors, a community to guide you as it were, who would be your lead? And the reason why I asked this question is, again, we all need support and we all need a community. And so if you think intentionally about your community in 2021, my guess is that you'll be able to really understand how you could work with those people and start to change who you are. I'm guessing we're going to start to see the results come in just a minute. So I'm going to pause while those come in.
Looks like we're almost about halfway, so I'll give us another 30 seconds for those poll results to come in.
Thank you, Taylor. And thank you all, by the way, for participating. I think that these are 3 pivotal questions, and I'm really looking forward to just getting a quick summary of what you all said. Wow, this is super impressive. Look at that. We have 93% saying they're open to change. So there's the possibility. In terms of where we want to build self-confidence, I was wondering if that was going to be the case. And I know that we've been through a lot as a country and as a region. So I'm glad to see that in terms of people understanding that that's something they need to take care of. And then look at this in terms of the personal board of advisors. First and foremost, thank you all for thinking about that. And I am so impressed with the fact that all of you are looking at colleagues, because your colleagues really do see a lot of potential in you. I'm going to go ahead and close that out for now and ask if we could go to the next slide. I want you to take a minute to just read this quotation. It's one of my favorite quotations, and it speaks to me, especially in terms of times of change. There are 2 things that I want to share with you with regard to this. And actually it kind of harks back to the poll, but we all need to dare to start to make career transitions before they can ever occur. I know that sounds kind of common sense wise, but if you don't take the chance, you really won't be there to actually have the opportunity to, when you step off, as it were, either land on something solid or be taught to fly. So that's the first point. The second point is, I want to share with you information from Arthur Brooks. Arthur Brooks runs a podcast called The Art of Happiness. And here he discusses in this podcast something called falling tides. Falling tides is all about when it's best to go fishing. Many of us would think that it's best to go fishing when there's really calm waters and you can see in essence what's going on. But what he found growing up on the coast of Oregon was actually the falling tide, when the tide is going out, is when there's the most feeding by fish and the most opportunity to catch things. When you apply that to our current economy or any time that we're in change, what you'll see is that it may feel like things are going away, but really what's happening is there's lots of churn. And so when Margie asked me earlier about what I thought in terms of 2021 was, the churn of 2020 is really going to be an opportunity for us all to look at our careers. And the thing about falling tides and career development is to know that opportunity is not disappearing, it's just changing its shape. And those who are open to seeing that change will be the ones who really be able to seize that opportunity. So keep this in mind as we move forward. Could we go to the next slide? I I wanted to just let you know that there are two basic topics I want to talk to you about. The first is the recruiting landscape that Margie mentioned earlier. And then, if we're driving our careers, we should probably have some guideposts. So the guideposts that I'd like to talk to you today about are map and motivation, meaning and making a difference, and career management in the era of COVID-19. So let's go first to, before we switch the slide, I'll tell you a little bit about the landscape of university recruiting, and why this is important is typically when university recruiting is making shifts, recruiters are also making shifts in other types of recruitments that they're having. So I'll take you back just quickly to spring and summer of 2020. When the pandemic hit and it looked like we were going to be closing down, a lot of our employers actually said, we need to pause. I want you to know that it was a pause. It wasn't we're pulling out. It was more, we're going to pause right now because we really need to understand what we can do in terms of offering internships, what we can do in terms of offering full-time employment. And so what I would say to you is that that's what that represented. And I think if you were listening too much to the media, you may have felt like all the jobs were going away. They weren't. So let's go to fall 2020. What do we know from recruiters? There's a survey done out of Michigan State University, and it's called Recruiting Trends. You can just Google it, Recruiting Trends. And what we're finding in terms of fall 2020 and looking ahead to 2021 is that employers really do want to ramp up recruiting. And what they're trying to figure out is what's the best way to use the virtual space to make sure that that happens. So all of you who are thinking about career change, please note that it's going to be really, really important to look ahead to the virtual spaces and events like this where you can keep connected to people. As we go into our next slide about slides about guideposts, I wanted you to know that if you were driving your career as like a car, you'd be driving a car, we all need a sense of direction. And so what I'm going to try and do today is give you 3 items that really will help you give a sense of direction. So let's talk first about map and motivation. For me, map is really what reflects when we talk about career paths, when we talk about our journeys in life. And what this shows me, and what I think it should show all of us, is that we really do have this need for direction and control. So please know that I know that all of us are trying to manage our careers in such a way, for example, that we can advance. It also shows us that as we pursue careers, that we actually matter, that what we're doing here makes a difference. So when you start to think about your map, what I want you to keep in mind, especially in this time of a falling tide, as Arthur Brooks would say, is a theory called planned happenstance. Planned happenstance is all about, in career development, when you develop your career plans, that you remain open to opportunity. I mention this because I can almost guarantee that each and every industry that you're in is experiencing some sort of change. And so what I would say is, what are going to be your guides is your map, but it's also going to be your motivation. And that's the second part of the first point, which is motivation keeps us invested in our career. Oftentimes we talk about motivation as purpose, which is those things that we want to do with our life. And so, for example, when you are thinking about map and motivation, I think it's important to answer these questions. What you want from your career at this point, who you are. I know that that's going to sound really remedial, but it's very, very important. And where you want to be. Like when you look at the landscape of what's ahead of you, where could you land, as it were? I want you to know that it's important to really, as you work through these ideas, to work with your board of personal advisors, because as I mentioned with regard to shame, I want to bring it up here again, is I have a Ph.D. in communication, and all my years of studying communication, what I've found is that if people don't have the wherewithal to really express what they want, it rarely occurs. So I want you to keep that in mind as you think through where you go next with your career. And for those of you who are Brene Brown fans, this is really where something like courage would come in terms of how do you take those next steps in terms of setting out your map. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about meaning and making a difference. What I would say here is most of us have careers that are what I would call purpose-driven. And it's important for us to invest time in those careers. And as we do that, it's important to understand that we're telling a story to ourselves, and eventually we tell it to others. And that becomes the basis of things like our getting an interview and our getting a job. I did want to pause here for a quick moment and talk a little bit about meaning in terms of job loss. I think we'd all be naive to assume that everybody stays employed for their entire life. Times like now are when people can lose their job. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is that it's really important to know that even in a time of a job loss, or especially in a time of a job loss, that we really need to have meaning in terms of understand our purpose. So we don't currently have it if we're unemployed through our career. So where do we get that? We get that through job searching, we get that through networking, we get that through volunteering and spending substantial time with family. And what that does is, as we start to understand meaning in that context, we can build a bridge to whatever comes next. I wanted to briefly mention in terms of meaning and making a difference that, again, with regard to a purpose-driven career, it's really important to understand both where you make a difference in terms of the skills that you bring and the strengths that you bring, but equally as important, I think it's important to understand where you can contribute to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm mentioning this because just today, NACE, the National Association of Colleges and Employers, came out with a survey of employers, and this looked at the future of college recruiting. And what they found was that 90% of employers are emphasizing diversity hires right now. And so as you think about where you are and what you want to contribute, I really would encourage you, especially in our region, to look at how you could make a difference in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion. If you want a great resource for this, there's a group called the AACU, aacu.org. It's the American Association of Colleges and Universities, and that's where you could find more information about that concept. Finally, I just wanted to mention in terms of meaning and making a difference, I know that we value our ability to make a difference, but we also have to consider our marketplace. And what I mean by that is you need to know what you value, what your marketplace values, and at that intersection is where your potential occurs. The third guidepost that I want to talk to you about has 3 parts, and if we could go to the next slide, that would be great. If you take a look at this, I've got 3 parts here in terms of how do you manage your career in the era of COVID-19. The first one is alignment, the second one is community, and the third one is reframing. So let's go up to alignment and start there. I mentioned I have a PhD in communication, and I've got to tell you that as I look at how we use language to communicate, especially in the arena of career, really big pieces that we use our communication to demonstrate our impact, and that's our resume and social media. I know that you may not often put those together, but please know that employers do. For example, in the arena of college recruitment, we actually now are providing vendors for our students where they can put their resume into a system and artificial intelligence takes over, and it actually shows them where there are inconsistencies between their resume and what they're saying about themselves on LinkedIn and other social media. So as you start to think about your purpose, I really want you to ask yourself, does your resume align with your social media, especially the social media that faces forward in terms of career development? The other thing that I wanted to mention is community building. Think back to the poll that I asked you to participate in just a few minutes ago. I asked you to think about who would lead that. And I really want you to understand that as you take advantage of the opportunities that come up in 2021, it's going to be really important to have your community see your potential and work with you on that potential as you move your career forward. If all you do is focus on who you are currently and what might be available to you in your immediate space, you're doing yourself a real big disservice. So what I would say is, when you work with your personal board of advisors or whomever you get career guidance from, think forward. Think forward in terms of where you might go. The final point that I wanted to make is anticipate setback and become adept at reframing. So we often hear things like, oh, just reframe that and rethink it. So I just want to tell you a little bit about what reframing is, and then I'll give you the 3 steps to doing a reframe. So reframing is the ability to look at a situation and to change the way that we review it or that we view it. So we look at it and we change the way that we view it. How does that occur? Okay, here are 3 steps. First, understand that our tendency is to view things from a negative viewpoint when an outcome isn't ideal. So when it doesn't turn out the way we want it, we often dismiss it or dismiss ourselves. So what you need to do is when that occurs, go to step 2. And what I want you to do is pause. And I want you to create a space between yourself and the outcome. You're not the outcome, you're yourself, obviously, and you have your own unique set of strengths. But if we don't do that, and we don't pause and we don't say, hey, this really isn't me in my entirety, this is just an experience I'm going through, we can't get to the third step. And the third step is this: ask ourselves how this outcome could be reimagined. How could we reinterpret the situation to learn from it, to see the opportunity in it, and to advance our career? And that's where the reframe occurs. I wanted to close by mentioning something that I said at the very beginning, which is, as you look at 2021 in your career, I'd encourage you to take manageable steps. I really would encourage you to think through things and not to overwhelm yourself. And actually, I want to close with the final slide. And we have a video queued up for all of you that we want you to see. And that video is actually Oprah offering some advice. So I'm going to close off my microphone and my camera, and hopefully we have the Oprah video ready.
The way through the challenge is to get still and ask yourself, what is the next right move? Not think about, oh, I got all of this stuff. What is the next right move? And then from that space, make the next right move and the next right move. And not to be overwhelmed by it, because you know your life is bigger than that one moment. You know you're not defined by what somebody says is a failure for you, because failure is just there to point you in a different direction. And that's all the time I got right now.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the clock.
Oh, I love that so much. I bet you guys didn't know you were going to have James and Oprah on this session. So just our little treat. There's so many good resources in the chat. I'm pointing over here like you can see it. There's a chat over there, and there's really good stuff. And I see Juliana has asked a question too. We're going to get to your question after Angela goes. And yes, people are asking if you can have this presentation later too. Yes, you can. There'll be an email, because there's such good stuff in here. We know you're probably going to want to listen to it again. Thank you, James, for that insight. We will bring you back here in a little bit with some questions. So we want to now kick it over to Angela Hanning. And the cool thing about Angela is she's taking that lay of the land that James gave and giving you also some nice next indicated steps, as Oprah was talking about, on some things you can do to really own it. So Angela, to you.
Hi. So I think am I following Oprah right now? Because those are big shoes to fill. I'm going to do my best.
Yes, that is happening. Yeah.
I'm ready. So we're going to talk about driving your career forward. So if we could put the first slide up, that would be great. And as we're putting that slide up, 2020 has been such a time of reflection. And as Oprah just told us, we don't want to be defined by certain moments. So let's not define ourselves or our career in the midst of a pandemic, but let's make sure that we are ready to advance our career forward. And I want to just second what James has been saying is, don't wait until 2021. Get out of the mindset that your mindset is going to change, your behavior will change on a certain date, and start now and start preparing yourself so that you are ready for those next moves when they happen. So 2020 has been, it's been a roller coaster, and it's not lost on me that many of you might have friends and family who were unemployed, maybe still unemployed. But I think a lot of us have had the opportunity to reflect and really decide what's important. And we are thinking about the future. We don't want to stay stuck in 2020. So I really want to encourage you that if you're thinking about what's next for you, that's good. That's resiliency. That's understanding that we're not defined by the pandemic, and we're going to be ready to go forward. So we're going to start with a quick poll. Taylor, can you throw that up? And we can advance the slide and put our poll up. And while that is going, my time today is really going to be about reframing and preparing for your next role. So I would love to know, where do you see your next career opportunity? Is it with your current employer, or do you see the possibility of you working with a new employer and moving into 2021? And Taylor, while that poll is going, can I ask you to advance the slide, please? At the base of all of this, and Margie kicked us off really well to talk about, you own your career. And here is your permission from an employer to take ownership of your own career and take ownership of your career development. Stop waiting. Do not wait for your employer. Do not wait for your supervisor to bring an opportunity to you. You very much must seize the opportunity to create your own development and advance your career. So how is the poll going?
Sorry, I was on mute. Of course, here we go. I'm sharing the results now.
Great. So with your current employer, and about 38% said with a new employer. Okay, great. So with your current employer, I'm still going to say industries are in a lot of change. And companies are in a great state of change. So there are a lot of companies, or let me pause and say, as an example, the hospitality industry is in recovery, but we know that there's pent up demand, and we know that there's going to be opportunities in the future. Alternatively, I think that there's other industries in our market, like technology, that have continued to advance during this time. So the time is now that you have to own this. And today we're going to talk about owning your personal brand and owning your development. So if we could go to the next slide and talk about personal brand. And I love that James also talked about this under map and motivation. But when you think about your personal brand, I really want you to think about, how do you show up and influence the world around you? How do you show up for work every day? And so one thing I want to encourage you to do is begin to journal. What are your values? What is most important to you? And think of the future. Think of a future vision of your very best self and create that avatar. What do you want to be doing? How are you fulfilled? What brings joy to your life then? So you really want to connect your vision and your values. And then from a behavioral standpoint, I would love for you to take inventory of, how are you behaving now? And does that lead people back to your personal brand of who you want to be? It's always been said that, you should always be acting in a way that presents yourself in the job that you want, not the job that you're in, but the job that you want. And so here is where I will ask you, how do you show up and treat your clients or customers? Will they understand what your personal brand is? How do you show up and interact with your workplace now? How does your supervisor see you? How do your peers see you? And so you have control of this. Margie and I were talking about in the prep of, sometimes in my career, I've had employees come and say, I'd love to be considered for this role. And then when you go back and look, their behavior in their current job doesn't necessarily demonstrate doesn't demonstrate those leadership capabilities that one would be looking for. So I want you to understand, it doesn't matter what you're doing. I truly believe that there's leadership at every single level. So own the job that you have. Make sure that you're presenting yourself in a way that as opportunities come up, you're ready because your personal brand is strong. Okay, we can move to the next slide. And I love this quote. So when we talk about personal brand, and if we're talking about driving your career forward, I need to make sure that we have time in our schedule to make sure that the value you're bringing to your organization is there. And I believe time is finite, right? And I wish we all had more of it. And as professionals, we have competing priorities. So I love this quote: show me your schedule and I'll know your priorities. And so what I want to do, because I'm really focused on action, what are the actions that you can take now to prepare you for the future? So I want to share something that I do, and it's called block and tackling your schedule. And the reason being is, as a leader, I have to stay laser focused on strategy. What's the future going to look like? How am I preparing my team and the employees at the Hyatt for what's to come? But I also have to manage the day-to-day as well. So I have to be super intentional about how and when I spend my time. So my encouragement to you is, if you're working on your personal brand, and we're going to talk about development in a moment, you have to be intentional about how you're developing yourself, both in your brand and in your career development. So I want to encourage you to make sure you are scheduling specific time throughout your day or week, and that you are getting the development that you need, that you're taking time and reflection and making sure that you're prepared. One of the things I've been using for the last couple of months, and this is not an ad, I'm just sharing a tool that I use, is the High Performance Planner by Brendan Burchard. I'm a huge fan of his work. He's got a great podcast. I'm currently listening to his audiobook as well. But the High Performance Planner really sets out levels of intention across professional, your family commitments, and just who you want to be. And I love it because it creates intention for you on a daily and weekly basis to make sure that you're focusing on the right work. And what is that right work? If you're in sales, the right work is revenue generating relationships. And I think we could all get mixed up in the email. And if you're just managing your day-to-day by email, you're managing everyone else's priorities. So what I love about this planner is you set the intention about the quality output and the value add that you are going to do for yourself that day, and everything else works out. So I love the planner. I think it's really important as you're looking for career development. Most of you said that you were going to be looking for development opportunities or advancement with your current employer. This would be a great opportunity to make sure that you are doing valuable work that's driving your organization and your team forward, to make sure that you're in the right position to take on that next step. So that is my recommendation, and we can move to the next slide, which is about owning your development. And I'd really encourage you to seek clarity on what you want to do next. And we talked about that avatar surrounding your personal brand. This is more of what might be the gaps that you have in either your knowledge or experience that you can start working on now, so that you're in a even better position to raise your hand for that next role. So when you identify those gaps, you might put those into different buckets. It might be you don't have the experience. And what I would offer to that is, can you take on a stretch project? Could you volunteer to run a committee? Could you volunteer to take on more, to do some sort of project? Your gap might be on a more learning, and there's certainly a plethora of informal learning opportunities that you could take on. For one, I would really encourage you to ask your employer. Most large employers are going to have a learning management system in place that have access to a lot of just different online training. So at Hyatt, we use a system that links out to LinkedIn Learning, and you can take time management, certain leadership courses. So ask your employer if there's certain courses that you'd be able to take on your own time. And then there's the formal learning, which of course you could enroll in a certificate program. You could enroll in courses at SDSU and do that way. But just start identifying those gaps and then take the steps necessary to get there. My plug here is, I know you have time, because most of us, we can kind of scroll Instagram or scroll certain things. But if you're really intentional about that time, find a really great article or a book. And as you're having your morning cup of coffee, read that instead of scrolling. So serve where you are is another piece. And this leads back to the point I made about a stretch project. Companies right now are in a great state of change. And, I think positions are evolving, and there's got to be something that you can identify. What problem is your organization or your company, your team trying to solve? Can you make a proposal to your supervisor to say, allow me to run this, allow me to try this? Here's what I've done. I've created a proposal. Here's what I need. Here's what I want to do. Can I take ownership of this? Here is where you're bringing a solution to your supervisor, and you're not dumping your needs on someone else. So think about it this way. You approach your supervisor and you say, I want to move up in my career. Tell me what I have to do. You've now just placed it on your supervisor, versus going into that same conversation and starting with, I'd love to move up in the organization. I noticed that we are working in this space. I've developed this proposal. I think I could get it done in X amount of time. I'd like your permission to begin now. So you're bringing a solution to your supervisor versus dumping your request on someone else. Now that there's a dichotomy there. If you need feedback, you need to ask directly for that, but I'm talking about a stretch project and serving where you are. Identify and raise your hand for that. And the last thing I'll say about owning your development is go for it. Raise your hand. The statistics, I think, for women specifically in the workplace is over 62% of women will wait to be told or wait to be asked to take on a project or to apply for the next role. So here's my permission, here's my encouragement, raise your hand. Even if you don't meet or match or check all the boxes that have been identified in a job description, do it anyway. The worst thing someone could say is no, right? And so I want to just really encourage you to go for it, take control of it, and just own it. And if we could go to the next slide, which is also our last and final poll. So we talked about owning your personal brand. We talked about owning your development and possibly asking for a stretch project, and also how you might identify how you could fill that gap. So I'm interested, where will you start today? Don't wait for 2021. What will you do now to start owning your career development? And while that's coming through, I have a quick note to any people leaders in the audience. Those of you who have direct reports of teams, I really want to encourage you that if you're leading people, we know by today's polls that people are thinking about their career development. So what might you do to encourage your team and help further their development on? I'm a big fan of, even in times of uncertainty and maybe business recovery, that we're still having regular check-ins with our team. Nothing is more critical right now than clear and concise transparency and communication. And so to those people leaders, please make sure you're having your check-in conversations. Do talk about the state of the business, where you think your team and the organization is going into the future, and make sure you're keeping your workforce engaged. Okay, so the results show, it looks like it's a split, working on personal brand and the skill gap, which is great. Good. I'm happy that you found some of these tools useful of taking ownership. And maybe I'll go, or Taylor, if we could just go to the last slide. What I'd like to do is just, in closing, I think that in times of certainty, there's tremendous power in tapping into your own capabilities and driving your own career in that. So owning your personal brand and really scheduling intentional time in your development and bringing value to the world around you is key to making sure that you're prepared for the future. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure being here.
Great stuff. Angela, there's just so much good stuff here. I have like insane amounts of notes and things that I've been taking, and questions are coming in from text message, from all kinds of places. So we'll start with some questions for Angela and James. The first question I'm going to start with, Juliana asked in the comments section. This is probably more for James, but Angela, if you have something, throw it in there. Are there specific industries that you're seeing actually are finding a hiring, boom because of the pandemic that maybe the attendees need to focus on?
A quick shout out to Juliana. She works in our center, so I'm thrilled she's here. We do see actually, and again, it's going to vary by region. So please know that whatever region you're in, if you're not subscribing to a business journal or not aware of what's going on in the region in terms of your economy, you got to do that research. But let's take, for example, just broadly throughout the US, the retail, especially online retail, I think is really experiencing a surge. We're seeing a real increase in terms of demand for the finance majors, for example, financial services and other areas like that, actually the corporate finance as well. And then I would also say that in terms of an ability, regardless of industry, to come in with a mindset and ability to contribute, because even in industries where they may have pulled back in the US, but might be multinational, they may be opening up other markets, and your ability to go to those markets and to do what Angela was mentioning in terms of retail, et cetera, would be a great skill set to have, especially if you're willing to relocate,
Great, thank you. And so then I got a question texted to me. I won't out the person, but they said, how can you advocate for your career internally if you feel like your employer has already made up their mind who you are and what your skill set is? Like they've put you in a box, here you are, and you don't see a way out of that. So Angela, do you want to take that one? Just what are maybe some advice or tools or encouragement for if you feel like they've already said, well, this is who you're going to be?
And that's hard. So I would say, I would ask for specific feedback, right? So if you're in an industry that maybe communication or sales is key and that's the skill, ask for specific feedback about how you can, what they're thinking. But I think let's pull it back to ownership. I think it's about proving them wrong, right? And there's been a lot of times in my career where maybe I've been the underdog, and I know something about myself is I've got the resiliency. And if you think I can't do it, I am going to say, watch me.
Oh, I love that. It gives me chills, makes me so happy. So I wrote down so many things with exclamation points in my notes. I love that, James, you focused a lot on community. And I think that's huge because to me, it's all about who you know and who you're asking for help with, especially if you're on the younger end of the spectrum, right? Going to someone who's been in your industry or an industry you want to go in and say, hey, can I talk with you? Can I get your advice? And then being, thankful for that and keeping in that relationship. So talk to me a little bit, James, about mentors. If I need someone in my village, because I don't have much of a village, how do I go find people to advise me in my career?
Right. And thank you, by the way, for mentioning that. And one of the reasons why I brought it up, just so you know, is I find that women, and especially people of color, don't do that. And they tend to not gravitate toward building a community. And I would really encourage you as you develop your career to do that, regardless of the stage. So in terms of mentoring, where you find that, I think a good first step is obviously LinkedIn. And if your alma mater, let's say you went to San Diego State and you go onto LinkedIn, you can start to find people who are alumni through that venue. The other is, I mentioned a personal board of advisors. If you have a personal board of advisors and you're not asking them who they know, then you're not doing your job with your personal board of advisors. So in terms of just locating, those are two places where I would start.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And talk to me, Angela, a little bit. I had someone text me. Oh, and I see something in Q&A too. I'll look at that in a minute. I had someone text and say, okay, owning it and stuff, whatever, but I want this title. How do you feel about titles? And I will just say that I've always been more impressed by people who said, these are the responsibilities I want, not this is the title I want. So talk to me, Angela, about when you sit there and you think about talent development, is it more about responsibilities for you? And is it my job to articulate to you what I want? Or, how do you suss that out?
That's a great question. So I think, especially now during change, we are looking at what are the capabilities, what are the knowledge, skills, and abilities that our workforce is going to have. So we're really looking at the responsibilities, right? And so I think if somebody is focused on a title, I'm going to say I think titles are going to shift soon, right? And what is a director in one area or one organization is a VP in another. So I think that, you could be honest with your employer and I'm sure you could figure something out. But as an employer, as someone who's looking at the future workforce, I'm focused more on the responsibilities.
Great. That's a good one. And then this one, this is a fascinating one. Really, either one of you wants to take this one. So this is from the Q&A from Anonymous. Don't worry, attendee, I cannot see who you are. So this person got an internal promotion into the marketing department within their company. They've been there a few months now, but now they're seeing other PR marketing agencies who are hiring and they don't know. This is such a great question. Do you stay, out of kind of guilt and I guess I should be here a certain amount of time, or do you apply to what excites you more now that it's there? And James, I don't know if you want to take this from a trends. I mean, how long should someone stay at a place, and when is it okay to pursue what you're excited about?
So, and Angela, I don't know if this is what you would agree with or not, but I would say at a minimum, maybe 2 years. The other thing, just in terms of this question is, my guess is in San Diego, we're a very small community in many industries. So as people make a choice about whether or not to go, they might want to, again, if they have a personal board of advisors, if they have a community with whom they talk, start to understand if the opportunities that they're looking to pursue are indeed what they think they are and what it's like to work in those organizations, and to really gain more information before you take the leap, because it's exciting that you're in this new position. I don't know for how long, but you really need to do more research before you make a leap. That would be my basic recommendation.
Okay, great. This person is saying that they're young, they're 24 and starting a career. And so they're trying to kind of get their bearings? I know that's a tough one. Angela, do you have something to add to the how long do you stay if something else excites you?
You know, here's the thing. I think if you just got a new promotion and you're growing into that role, do your due diligence, right? Understand what's out there. And, you know, if it's maybe that's more money, can you go back and ask and say, hey, the market is paying this. I'd like to ask. Again, someone can just say no. Timing is hard. So I think of, again, understand what your role is, but moreover, what have you contributed to the role? So if someone promoted you and they've developed you, are you leaving it better than you had it? Then maybe it is time to go. But I would be careful, especially early on, of just jumping ship. But listen, you got to own it. So do your due diligence. If it's a great opportunity for you, don't lose it, but make sure you're giving your employer an opportunity at least to come back and counteroffer, broaden your responsibilities, that type of thing.
And I'll say to the 24-year-old anonymous that since your area is PR, a lot of times it may look really sexy to go work for a PR firm. It's a much different environment, and often for the younger set, a lot more hours and craziness. So you really have to think about what is it that excites you about that role. Is that something you could talk to your current employer about adding to your mix? Like, is there something there that you could do that doesn't take you into agency life, which as an agency owner is very different than being an in-house person most of the time. So maybe look at that role and see if you could talk to your boss about incorporating what excites you about that into your current role. We have another question. We have room for maybe one or two more. So when do I know the time is ripe to ask for a promotion? So it's not my annual review, but maybe there's an opportunity or something's going on, and I feel like I need to put myself out there, but how do I know when it's really the right time?
I can start with that one.
Okay.
What I always recommend people do is to let your supervisor know, and I supervise many, many people, and I let them know if they don't ask you what you think of your future. And you put it out there, and like I said in my presentation, you start to, in essence, plant the seed and make the reality. If you never say anything and then you get angry at your supervisor or your organization for not giving you a promotion, they don't know. They may assume that you're happy where you are. So you've got to start putting it out there before it happens, and give people time, because organizations can change very slowly. And it's important to know that you putting it out there and you having the patience and you constantly, what Angela says, demonstrate who you are to the organization, I think will speak volumes and actually take you much farther than just assuming it's going to occur overnight or somebody can read your mind.
All right. And then I'll give you guys about a minute each to answer this. Is there any kind of imparting advice, motivation? I mean, my heart kind of stopped and then started beating quickly when I saw that the most of the people on the call wanted someone just to build their confidence in this, because you guys are so worth it. Your career is worth it. You as a human are worth it. I hope this session has built some confidence in you, because this is your career. So Angela and James, you have some imparting wisdom. You got a minute each to build the motivation. Angela,
Okay.
let's start with you.
Okay, sounds good. So I'm going to say, start today. Start right now, and like what Oprah told us, what is the first next step? Start there. Congratulate yourself for doing that. Start getting real about who and what you want to represent, the value that you're going to add, and it doesn't have to be perfect. Progress over perfection.
Love that. In 25 seconds. So nice work. Also never thought I'd be in a Zoom session where people keep saying, like Oprah just said. So I have to act like she's here. Okay, James, go.
What I would say, just building on what Angela mentioned, separate yourself from your experience. And what I mean by that, when you face a setback, it's not you. You don't become that failure, don't become that setback. Learn from it and move your career forward. Separate the two so that can become a learning experience versus, oh, I'm bad now and forever, or I'm whatever. But really learn to separate the two and move forward with learning.
Great. This has been, this session has just made my heart so happy. And I have never seen a session where the participant number kept going up. It's real weird. So I think that people must have been saying to their friends, hey, you need to hear this or something. That was awesome. And so I know Sarah's going to close us out, but I just want to say to folks who are on here, please do reach out to us. When you have 3 people saying you're worth it and you're great and it's your career and let's go, and you have their LinkedIn, you should connect with them on LinkedIn so that we can be a part of that village and cheerleaders for you. We're also having someone who just said, can we get a copy of the presentation? Yes, there will be an email that goes out that has the live stream with the documents, but we'll hand it over to Sarah. Thank you guys for being here, and please connect with us.
All right. I feel like, you know, if you thought a video of Oprah was hard to follow, that's definitely hard to follow, this conversation that's been happening today. Thank you so much, Margie, for leading this, for lending your voice to moderate today, and for Intesa's sponsorship of this session. A really big thank you to both Angela and James. We really appreciate your expertise. And it was very clear from the attendance from today's session that our attendees felt the same way. So thank you to you both. And thank you to our participants. I echo Margie entirely. We hope you leave this session feeling a little bit more inspired, a little bit more confident in the value that you bring and the future that your career holds. If you're interested in additional professional development opportunities with regional experts like this one, we encourage you to sign up for our email list to receive next year's topics. Fed and Educated is going to be a continuing program with the Downtown Partnership, and we can't wait to see what the next year brings. We also invite you to consider, if you can, a membership with the Downtown Partnership. If you feel like these kinds of conversations and connections to folks like James and Angela and Margie would help your organization and your professional career succeed. We will be, as Margie mentioned, making a recording of this webinar available tomorrow. In our follow-up email to participants, not only will it have the recording, it'll have all these great resources that were mentioned all in one place. Feel free to forward it to your friends, to your colleagues, anyone who needs that information in their lives. Like we did today, we really enjoyed it. One of the best things about these sessions is that we, the Downtown Partnership team, get to participate as well and have a little bit of learning to add to our own days. So thank you again. Thank you to Intesa. Thank you to our speakers. Everyone stay safe, stay strong, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.